Good evening and welcome to the 7th Annual SF Urban Film Fest. Thank you for joining our watch party exploring the urban American Indian experience in Yelamu. We're so fortunate to have been able to screen all the films, but especially Sinyu, which tells an important story but is rarely screened for general audiences. My name is Faye Darmawi and I'm the founder and executive director of the SF Urban Film Fest. Our mission is to use film to inspire conversation and action around urban issues. In addition to Ron and Crystal, who I'll bring onto the stage in a moment, our core team includes program producers Robin Abad and Omid Manicherry and Susanna Smith. I would also like to give a shout out to our marketing guru, Hannah Moore, and all our volunteers. And now I will pass it on to Ron Sundstrom.
Thanks, Faye. Hello, everyone. I'm Ron Sundstrom, Humanities Advisor at the San Francisco Urban Film Fest and co-creator of tonight's program. We are delighted and honored to collaborate with the American Indian Cultural District of San Francisco. They co-presented and co-created tonight's program. I'll pass it now to Crystal Selleck. Thank you.
And I am Crystal Chelik, Festival Manager and co-curator of tonight's program. In addition to tonight's films, we hope you've had a chance to watch the films available on our website, Gold, Greed, and Genocide, and Beyond Recognition, which provide important context for this conversation. The last clip you just watched was an excerpt of Beyond Recognition featuring Greg Castro, Ohlone cultural preservation activist, American Indian Cultural District board member. I'm honored to welcome Greg to give a land acknowledgement now.
Thank you. Hushatuhi, greetings to all my relatives. I'm Greg Castro. I'm Ramaytush and Ohlone and Totros Linen, and I'm honored and deeply humbled to be able to give this land acknowledgement to the ancestors of my people, the Ramaytush Ohlone of the San Francisco Peninsula. Our stories tell us that we've been here since the time immemorial. And we were placed here to be caretakers of this place and to take care of all the people on this place. And so we welcome you and thank you for having us here. Hayene Hersha Pesha Walrap. Welcome to the homeland of the Ramaytush Ohlone. Thank you.
Thank you, Greg. We will begin our panel discussion shortly, but first there are a few announcements. First, I'd like to say thank you in advance for your patience. As we know, unpredictable things may happen as we're still getting used to virtual events. Please leave a message in the comment box if you have any issues. I'd also like to let everyone know that this program is being recorded. A special thank you to our members joining us tonight. If you'd like to keep our community growing and become a member, it's easy to do so via our website. Our festival this year is Pay What You Can, so that all can access our programs. If you'd like to donate, you help keep this offering possible by offsetting our costs. Lastly, for me, please fill out our quick survey using the link on screen or in the comments. It's really important that we get as many survey responses as possible to understand who we're reaching and to make sure we're serving our diverse and wonderful audiences as best we can. And to Ron.
We are thrilled to present this event to you tonight. The topic of exploring the urban American Indian experience in Yelamu. In addition to being enthusiastic about the films that we just watched and tonight's panel, we are also honored to work with the founders and representatives from the American Indian Cultural District. Our Bay Area cities have layers involving the tech industry, wartime industries, civil rights histories, but let us go deeper to what was here before the city of San Francisco, Oakland, Berkeley, and other Bay Area locales, and still remains. Our now has been formed and is just as much about what and who we were, what and who were here first. We are on and always have been on American Indian land that, despite the actions and laws of federal and local governments, is still populated by its first peoples. Tonight is a moment for us to gather and reflect on the truth about the layers of our collective experience and the collective responsibilities we have to that living indigenous history. We are so excited that tonight's panel will be moderated by Sheree Souza, Executive Director of the American Indian Cultural District of San Francisco. She will introduce this evening's panelists. As a reminder, throughout the discussion, please submit your questions through the comment section below the viewing screen if you are joining us on our website. And also, you can drop your questions in the chat function on YouTube or Facebook. And now I will turn it over to Sheree Souza.
Good evening, Ron. Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here. Hello, everyone. My name is Sheree Souza, as Ron said, Executive Director for the American Indian Cultural District. It's an honor today to be able to hear from our board members and leaders in the community. I'd like to first start with introducing Greg Castro. He's a Ramaytush Ohlone board member. He's also he's the chair of our policy and external relations, and he's also with the Association of Ramaytush Ohlone. Welcome tonight, Greg.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. For the next person I'd like to introduce the American Indian Cultural District Advisory Board President, Mary Travis Allen. Welcome tonight, Mary.
Good evening, and thank you. Pleasure to be here.
For our next panelist, I'd like to go ahead and introduce April McGill. April McGill is the Arts and Culture Chair for the American Indian Cultural District. She's also the Executive Director for the American Indian Cultural Center, and she also works for the California Consortium for Urban Indian Health. Good evening, April.
Good evening, everybody.
For the next person, I'd like to introduce my brother, Peter Bratt. Peter Bratt is also on the Arts and Culture Committee for the American Indian Cultural District, and he works for the Friendship House Association of American Indians. Good evening, Peter.
What's up, Shreya? April, Greg, Mary.
Awesome to see you all here.
Glad to be here.
All right, we're gonna go ahead and start the evening off with a couple questions for all of you all, so I hope you're ready. We'll go ahead and pick on you first, Greg. Can you please share with us what you want people to know about Yelamu and our Ramaytush Ohlone relatives?
Wow. How many hours, days, weeks do we have for this? So to condense it down into a few sentences, I think it's important to know that in contemporary time, San Francisco thinks of itself as having a long history, but it's a history that most of it is unknown to most people, because the history stretches back before European contact, which was only 250 years ago. And in terms of indigenous time, that's a blink of an eye. So in our terms, our ancient oral traditional narratives tell us we were here at the beginning of time. And archaeologically, there is evidence of Ramaytush people being on the peninsula for more than 10,000 years. So we've been here just a little bit longer, know it just a little bit better, and we're still here in the immediate area. Although the story of our sojourn during the colonial time is kind of a tragic one, as is true for most Native Americans in the continent and certainly in California. And we're going to hear some of that, and you saw some of that and heard some about that in the films that preceded this panel. And so we're going to talk about that, but I think it's important to know we're still here. We're still trying to take care of the land as our Creator committed us to do and obligated us to do as a sacred role for us as people, as a gift of this land to us. And this is how we show our graciousness and gratitude for Creator for giving us this place. We're still here, and we're still trying to make sure it keeps on going as best as it can, and that includes all the people on it.
Thank you, Brother Greg. As an American Indian woman, Taos Pueblo, Ute, and Kiowa, it's an honor to be a guest here on Ramaytush Ohlone land. I'd like to go ahead and ask the next question to our board president, Mary. Can you please share some moments that you think define the urban Indian experience?
Sure, Sheree. Thank you. You know, I was born in 1956 here in San Francisco, and Greg, I give all respect to the Ramaytush people for allowing myself and my family to be here and to thrive on this land. You know, growing up in the 60s, that itself was a time of change and awakening nationwide for people, civil rights, advocacy for many people here, particularly our Black relatives that were on this land. But there were things that still needed to be addressed here. And, you know, through relocation and people coming to the Bay Area, many families settled here. And we became an intertribal community here in San Francisco. And it was interesting. Well, one of my first memories here was being a young child down on Market Street with my mother, and a person coming up to us and being very aggressive, spitting on us and telling us to go back to where we came from. And my mother standing up and saying, "You don't belong here. My people were here from time and beginning." And I looked at my mother, and I didn't really fully understand what was going on at the time, other than, you know, people were pushing us out, telling us we didn't. And seeing the strength of my mother to stand up to this person that was probably twice her size, you know, and saying, "No, no, we belong here, not you." A little bit later, you know, things started to change. You know, the hippie movement started, you know, and we saw people, you know, adapting in the Bay Area to what I would say usurp who we were. You know, they started wearing headbands, and, you know, everybody had a Cherokee Indian princess in their ancestry, you know. And I was like, damn, them Cherokees really got around, you know. But, you know, not long after that, you know, we heard about the first occupation out on Alcatraz. And it was a small group of Lakota people that went out there, and they were stating claim to Alcatraz because it was a surplus federal land. And under the treaty, the Fort Laramie Treaty, surplus lands were to be returned to the original people. Later on in 1969, certainly there was the longer occupation that students that had gone to UC Berkeley and, San Francisco State got together and with Richard Oakes, and they did a longer occupation. That brought identity to us. It brought a community identity to us. We started having more visibility, and we were able to speak out, and there was a lot more movement that was happening after that. In 1973, Wounded Knee happened, and I was still a teenager at that time, and I joined AIM. And Glide Church was our first place, and we had lots of people, veterans from Alcatraz that came over, and they were a part of the movement. And it just, we were able to stand up and start having a voice here in the Bay Area. And there was so much work to do. We gained an Indian center, and then it burned down, and then we had another Indian center over on Valencia Street, and there were programs there, the arts program, Elaine and Jim St. Martin, teaching young people, and the gathering place for the Indian Center where we had dances and we had events. And, growing up here, then I started thinking, we had powwows. Every weekend there was a powwow to go to. The colleges had powwows. DQ University was thriving. All these good things were happening. San Leandro was the big powwow that Adam Nordwall had over there. And we would gather, and then that one stopped, and we started going to Casa de Fruta. And that was so beautiful down there because it was undeveloped.
That's
People
the best
would go
powwow.
Yeah, it was beautiful. You'd get there and you smelled the earth, and it was just everybody coming together. And then Stanford started happening, and we had a place to gather and be. And during this time, I became a parent. And you know, um, Indian Ed programs started happening here in San Francisco, and we had a program director, Jim Sweeney, that brought everybody together, and you know always told us, don't be silent. He had us writing, papers. The kids had publications in the newsletter. We were out and about. Things that were going on in the schools, we were being misidentified as Asians, being denied entry in the schools. My son was denied entry into Lowell High School because he would upset the ethnic balance of the school, because they were categorizing everybody as Asian. And, we went down there and pounded our fist and spoke up. So, as a community, and then things started changing. We were moved around. The Indian Center closed down, the Indian Ed program. We were nomads. We were here, there, and everything, not being able to stabilize everything. But recently, there's been a revitalization to that. And I'm now a grandmother and great grandmother. And I tell you, the fights that are happening now, the voices that are being elevated, the advocacy now, it's coming full circle. And it's real pride to me to see our youth leaders that are now stepping up and carrying this forward. And, there's just so much to be said about, growing here. It's like converging and praying together and respecting the land and coming together and revitalizing, the seeds that are being planted and watching them grow. So, that was it. And I know we'll talk later more about the films that was saying, but, so much about Sinu that touched my heart, you know, that brought forward those feelings of identity and struggle and pain. And, all our families, have felt that. And we continue to fight. As Brother Greg said, it doesn't stop. We are here. We continue to be here, and we're not going anywhere, folks. So get used to that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. I know that question wasn't easy. I really appreciate you just taking that heartfelt time to kind of walk us through your experience and just some of the key things that, as an elder, you were able to witness along the way and really be a part of, as an urban native in the San Francisco community. And I think that you did a really good job of painting a picture of, hey, like we used to have POWs every day. We used to have the American Indian Cultural Center that used to be a place, for us to come together and to really, be part with our families. And I think even now, just seeing that, the way that I met all of you, through my sister April, who, we're about to talk to next, was through the American Indian Cultural Center. And I just think it shows that resilience, that even though we don't have that space, we're still here and we're still finding ways to be family, and we're still finding ways to be strong and come together. So I just wanted to say thank you for that. And I think that's a great way to segue into April. Can you share with us why it's so important to elevate the voices of Native youth and bring visibility to American Indian health disparities?
Thank you, Sheree, for being our mediator today. I also want to thank the San Francisco Urban American Film Festival for creating this platform for American Indians, because it's really important for folks to know there's still Indians here. There's Native people here, and it's really important because a lot of people believe that California Indians are extinct. I'm from Round Valley. I'm Yuki, Little Lake Pomo, Wailaki on my mother's side, and Michua Wapo on my father's side. And when I think about urban Indians, I think about my great-grandpa, Doc Fullwider, who were talking with family recently. And my great-grandpa used to live in San Francisco. And he used to live downtown by the bus station. And he used to sit down there all day, from what I understand, and meet different Indian people as they came through San Francisco. Mm. And he would come to San Francisco for work, and then he'd go back and forth up to the reservation, and kids would, the grandkids would circle around him to hear all his stories about San Francisco. And so I think about him, as being an urban Indian, because we live in these urban places, and we need to make sure that our youth are understanding that just because they're in these concrete jungles and urban reses, that they're still connected to their people and their culture. We have a lot of health disparities on the reservation as well as in urban communities. We have a high number of substance abuse. We have homelessness, and we have one of the highest numbers of COVID right now as well. And so I think it's really important for our youth to stay connected to culture. They need to know about the health disparities and how drugs and alcohol can affect them, and how these things are not a part of our culture, and how, just how these problems happen, in every community. But because we have such rich culture, that as long as we teach our children about our songs, our dances, and make sure that they're connected, then it reduces them wanting to go out and use. I know that we have a high number of depression among all people in our Native communities. It's due to a lot of the colonization that's happened within our community. Right here in California, people don't know the history of California, and how during the gold rush, so many of our people were wiped out, murdered. We were one of the first ones to be missing and murdered. California is number 5 in the nation for missing and murdered Indigenous women, with San Francisco being one of the top 10 cities for missing and murdered Indigenous women. People often ask, in some of the work that I'm doing with the California Consortium for Urban Indian Health, they ask often, like, why do you think we have a high number of missing and murdered Indigenous women or people? And we know that because of colonization. We know that due to the gold rush, and also just coming here and enslaving our women and children, putting our children into boarding schools, the mission system right here in San Francisco. People will often say that about our Ohlone relatives, and my grandma shared a lot of these stories with me as a young person. And so I think our children need to hear those stories, admire the work that Greg is doing for his people to constantly educate their people and folks like you who are watching this, that we're still here, that there's a rich history here in San Francisco. And a lot of us, like me being Yuki and Wapo, we used to come here. We traded throughout the whole coastline, throughout California, trading and marrying into each other's different families. So for us, we're all related in this, intertribal community. And so I think that, the more we educate our youth, the more we educate our community to create visibility. That's one of the things that I do with American Indian Cultural Center. The American Indian Cultural District was birthed out of the American Indian Cultural Center, and I think that we need more visibility. We're the only community that does not have a cultural center. And we have one of the largest American Indian communities. 90% of American Indians live in cities such as San Francisco, Oakland, and Los Angeles. So I think, as we instill all of these positive things about our culture and who we are as Indian people, it builds a self-esteem for our children and youth, and they'll have pride in who they are. And I think that that's where most important when we think about those health disparities and how do we stop that is really looking at the next generation of our youth.
Thank you, April. I think that was, it's hard to, there's just so much going on with Native health disparities, being folks with the highest suicide rates, our children showing up to school as mascots, like you said, the mission system, and Brother Greg, people thinking that, they can go party and do things on that land and disrespect it in a different way because we're not here anymore. So I really, I really appreciate that kind of narrative of the bigger things that our youth have to deal with and why that visibility is really important. Because I think that if folks don't think we're here, then they don't see our health disparities. Or like you said, they think we just live on reservations. And if they think we all get federal funding and we live on reservations, then there's no incentive to really address those urban natives. So I think just hearing from the three of you all did a really great job of just showing people, like even you said, your grandpa just used to sit at that bus stop every day. That we're here, we've been really enriched in this community. So that leaves onto a brother, Peter. Peter, you use film, to talk about different Native issues. I'd really love to know, what inspired you to do film and how do you think that film helps elevate these Native issues?
Great. First of all, I could listen to April and Mary all day. They're oral historians, storytellers. Like Mary, I was born in San Francisco at Kaiser Hospital over on Divisadero and Gary Street, and it was really the American Indian civil rights movement, I would call it, that was in many ways birthed right here in San Francisco. San Francisco has always been on the vanguard politically, culturally. And one of the things I remember at all the different gatherings and the marches and the cultural gatherings is music, storytelling. And I would notice that, in the movement days, victories are few and far between. And so to keep the community resilient, the community called upon artists, storytellers, drum groups, dancers, singers, storytellers, painters, muralists, and I always kind of gravitated towards that. And when I got into college, I took this film class, and I was stunned by how so much of my own perceptions about myself, about my people, about the world were shaped by what I had consumed and watched as a child on television and the big screen. And I was really intrigued by that. And marrying that with just seeing how art could build resilience in a community, I was pulled into film for those kind of, political, social justice motivations. And that's how I got in. I mean, I've always loved going to the movies. I grew up going to the Mission Theater, seeing Bruce Lee movies and Clint Eastwood and everything. And back then you could go catch a double feature for 50 cents. And we used to sneak into the New Mission and the Grand Theater and the Granada, up and down Mission Street and seeing movies. And I love movies. And back in the day, we used to have drive-ins. And I remember my mom's house during the occupation was like the unofficial mainland headquarters. And so every Native person who came to San Francisco, they arrived at 3 in the morning to go to Alcatraz, they would crash up at our house in the backyard, in the front porch. And I remember piling into the car, like 6, 7, 8 Indian cars broken down, driving to the drive-in with mattresses. And we get there and pull out the mattresses and we watch, like movies. And but just movies were always kind of there. And was drawn into the storytelling, and a lot of the stories that the experiences you're sharing right now are conveyed through storytelling. Culture is preserved through storytelling, is reinterpreted through storytelling, as you can see with some of these short films. And I find them to be really empowering and inspiring and entertaining. They just draw you in. We do it on the internet or whatever, but we still gather around the campfire and we take in stories. No matter who you are, no matter where you live, we can't get away from them. So it seems to be our nature. But that's what drew me in.
Thank you, Brother Peter. That's beautiful. I love how you painted the picture of film as storytelling. I think for all of us, when we watch those films again that were sent our way, like emotion came up, a reminder of our responsibilities, a reminder of why we're still here, a reminder that as far as we've come, we haven't come that far. We've come far in some areas, but we still have a lot of way to go, and the city has a lot of things and a lot of promises they need to upkeep. And so with that, I'd love to, a lot of you gave a lot of great historical context and things that have happened into the city. I'd love to just understand, from all of you, and I'll go and ask this question, what are some moments from the film that stuck out to you in relation to your own experience as an urban native? And let's mix it up a little bit. April, I'm going to go ahead and start with you. What are some moments from the films that really stood out to you?
Yeah, I'll talk to the movie Sinew. That movie with Betty Cooper and our sister Theda Newbreast really gave a good example and how I could relate to it as a urban native. A lot of times, like earlier I was saying, 90% of native people live in urban communities, and it's really hard for us to go home. A lot of times we go home and we think, wow, I'm going to go home. I'm going to go help my community. And you want to go back. But when you go back, it can be really difficult because our people are still suffering. Our people are still in poverty. Our people are still having substance use problems, high suicide rate, unemployment rate. And this is on all of our reservations. It's not just one in California. And so when I think about that story that Betty shares about coming to Oakland and I had that same kind of thing with my son, living, I was living in Portland for a while when I was getting my master's degree and then coming back to San Francisco, he used to cry to come back to San Francisco, and I think part of that was like people that looked like him, his community was here. And I think that that's what happens a lot of times is it's hard for us to go back home. It's hard for us to want to do work because we're not always accepted. When we go off and we go get our degrees and education, we have our relatives that say, come back, work for us, come help our people. But then a lot of times when we come back, we sometimes are shunned or not accepted because, they don't have the same opportunities as us. And so they see us coming in as outsiders and trying to change things or trying to make changes that maybe our community is not ready for yet, and I think that that's where it's really humbling. And, there's always that time to to go back and visit relatives. That's what I love to do. I love to go back home and visit my family. But I could really relate to Sinew when I was looking at that, and how Grandma Betty was struggling with her children, and how when they would go to school, there was no Blackfeet children there. And a lot of our children in this education system, they have the same issues. They go to school and there's no other youth that look like them. And then they're having to tell their story, and it feels very token, as that token Indian in the classroom teaching. So I could really relate to that movie and piece when Betty was sharing that, and hearing Theta talk about her experience as well. That's what really stood out for me.
Thank you, April. That's powerful. It's a powerful drawback to just how you relate it to, your son and our youth, and what they have to go to school and see every day as urban Indians, or folks, maybe folks that were relocated or their parents were relocated. I'm going to pick on you next, Greg. What are some moments in the film that kind of stood out for you, or that you can relate to in your urban Indian experience?
So the sequences I hear that people saw before the panel here were from me. And as Brother Peter would know, you do hours and hours of filming, and then you have to trim it up to fit it into whatever slot. So, Michelle, who is the producer director of the film about Karina Gould, probably did about an hour and a half to 2 hours of filming in 2 different places to get those 3 minutes of fame that I got in the film, and condense it. And it was interesting to see what she chose for me to share with the audience. Was interesting. And part of it was just remembering, similar experiences to Karina. She grew up in her homeland across the bay here in Huichin and Lishan, in Chochenyo land. And I grew up in the South Bay in San Jose, a drive away from my mother and father's homeland in the Monterey area. And being kind of alone, as April said, people didn't know. I grew up in the east south side of San Jose in a heavily Hispanic community, and with a last name and a heritage that also is Hispanic. And my parents spoke Spanish, as many California Indians did, to survive, and had no choice, because they were prevented from speaking their language, singing their songs, telling their stories. And of course, there was the genocide during the American period, where we had to hide to even survive. And the people that you see, for the most part, across California is the descendants of about 5% of all the people. 95% of our ancestors passed away after being here for 15,000 years. We have only, in a shorter period of time of about 111 years, from 1769 to the 1880 census, the records show that probably more than 95% of all the California Indian people were gone. And of course, the 5% that lived suffered tremendously as well. And so that struggle still continues. That just doesn't go away in a short amount of time. You can't wipe out 200 years of trauma, but you also cannot wipe out 15,000 years of heritage either. So those two things are always struggling within us. And I saw that when I first saw the film. It was actually, I think, the full film, Beyond Recognition. I saw the whole thing for the first time along with the public at a public event, and was on a panel with Karina. And hearing Karina's story was very much like mine, growing up in an urban area and not being acknowledged, and including by other Native people, our relatives that had been brought here from other parts of the country through the relocation process. And they were subject to the same school system that California people are subject to, that erased us, that called us extinct, that said we were here and now poof, magically we're gone, and didn't say how that happened. And yet, I'm still here. And lots of Native people have those stories of going home from especially 3rd and 4th grade and being told you're extinct, and then going home and asking your parents, what's that about? What's that mean? And in the case of my dad, he kind of had a smart Indian practical answer. He said, well, if they think you're dead, they won't try to kill you. And I laugh at that, but also I see the tragedy behind that too. He grew up raised by grandparents that were born in the late 19th century, where it was still dangerous to be Indian, still a lot of prejudice, even more so than now. And so he grew up with that understanding of, know who you are, know where you came from, and don't tell anybody, because it could be dangerous. And that still lingers. And of course, in the times we live in now, it's not a total figment of our imagination. It's a reality that we deal with. And especially our women folk, the work that is being done now for missing and murdered Indigenous women is absolutely necessary and vital to our communities, and has been going on for a lot longer. It's not a new thing as it is in the public eye. It's been going on for decades. And so that is one of the struggles that we have of getting people to understand it's a reality that Indian people are really here, and they're struggling, and they're still struggling. I'll end it by saying, my personal opinion of the concept around historical trauma. It's a real thing. It's a reality that we deal with every day. And that's why I don't use the word historical. I say it's community trauma, because it's a contemporary trauma that we exist, that's been passed along from our ancestors through our elders to us, and we live it out every day. And the laws, if you look at what the laws allow happen to us still, it's still ongoing. It's a constant battle that we still continue, and sadly our descendants will still have to do it. But it's getting to the point where we know how to use the tools of common contemporary society in order to address those issues in a much more powerful way. And I'm really incredibly proud and humbled by our young people, especially our young women. Shariah, we give her a lot of grief, but she is an example of our powerful young women, them, and even the younger generations that are in high school. Some of them took off and went to Standing Rock. They're out there protesting and marching, that in ways that we could barely imagine in my day. So I have some hope because of the power of our young people, our young women, that things are going to get better finally, and they will achieve the dreams of our ancestors.
Oh, big O for Greg.
Oh, thank you, Brother Greg. That was strong. There was a lot of really deep things shared in there. I appreciate that. I think, like April shared before too, I think we can all relate to that. I mean, growing up with a Miwok name in a town that was 98% white, I remember in the 4th grade, I had my desk turned against the wall, and all the other kids faced forward, and I never understood it. And I went back home, and I heard my teacher ask me in the 6th grade, where's your green card? So they knew our family was from New Mexico. They didn't understand that Pueblo wasn't, or that New Mexico wasn't, Mexico. So that really stood out to me, that if they think you're invisible, they won't kill you. But also if they don't understand you or they don't see you. And the quote that stood out to me the most was, you can't wipe out decades of trauma, but you also can't wipe out our heritage. That was really deep. So thank you so much. I'm going to go ahead and pass this question on to Brother Peter. What were some of the moments in one of the films that stood out to you and that you can relate to as your experience as an urban native? Peter, you're on mute.
Sorry about that. I love it. Can relate to all the films. I know the filmmakers of each one, but I think for me particularly is the People's Home, about the raising of the teepee. When I was about 5 years old, I came home. I was crying to my mom. It was, in the Mission District, and my brother and I, all the kids were playing, and there was a white family, and we went into to go with all the other friends into the house, and I said, my mom says, my family says no colored people can come in. And my brother was 4 and I was 5, and I was like, what does that mean? And I went home and I remember asking my mom, what does that mean, and how come I had to be brown? And I didn't have any context for this color. And then in the summertime, it would get really dark, and so I would like be ashamed. I would wear long sleeve shirts because I didn't want to be dark. And it wasn't really until the occupation of Alcatraz where my mom said, the reason why you're dark is because you're Indian. You have Indian blood. You come from Indian people. She comes from Peru in the South. And, even today, we have to really be mindful of language. Even, I see full-blooded Mayans. These are the first people who had the corn bundles that went north and south. When they come here, they're called illegal aliens. We have all this different language that we use to erase indigenous identity. And when I went to Alcatraz as a boy, I remember not being sure, but what does this mean that I'm Indian? What does this mean? And then I saw all these young Indian people who came from Canada and New York and just like all across the hemisphere, and they were raising fists. They were saying like red power and Indian and proud, and just started growing their hair. And I mean, I was overwhelmed by that experience, and it was meaningful that I was on this island, surrounded by, mainstream white society. Here's this island where all of a sudden there was this rush of cultural pride. And I was 7 years old during the occupation when my mom moved us all there. And one day, me and a bunch of kids, we were just, we're wandering around the island, and there was a young man who was shaving teepee poles. And he was like, hey, what you doing over there? Like little kids. And he said, what am I doing? Come over here and find out. And we helped him shave teepee poles. His name was Robert Free. And we ended up putting the teepee up, and it became like this iconic beacon. People took pictures of it, and it was broadcast all around the world, and Indian people saw that teepee on the island, and they came even more. And after we finished putting up the teepee, he gave me a red-tailed hawk feather, and he said, you can't buy these. You can only earn them. And he said, today, you and all your friends, you earned this feather. And as I grew up in later in life, I developed a very intimate relationship with teepees. I put up many thousands of teepees. And a few years ago, just before the 50th anniversary, Robert, who's now an elder, lives up in Seattle. He said, Peter, before I leave this earth, I want to put the teepee up in honor of all the wounded warriors, fallen warriors. Will you help me? And he said, not only that, he said, I remember when you were a child, you helped me with that teepee. He said, let's get our youth. And he said, I want to pass it on to them. And what's more, I want to give them an eagle feather, just like I gave you a feather. And so it kind of came together last minute, and, just organizing and working with the Park Service, calling Karina, hey, Karina, we need Ohlone, can you come help us out? And, Moves Camp came out from Pine Ridge. We had some medicine people. We called a lot of the original occupiers who were also on the island. And then our youth, we all met downtown San Francisco, and we carried those poles on the ferry. We got them over there, and we carried them just like they did, back in 1969. And then the youth, they put up this teepee, and it was, my children were there. There were so many kids from the community were there, and it was a very emotional, spiritual, like full circle for me personally. And I called some friends to bring their cameras. I said, just come and document it. And from that documentation, we put together this, short little 5-minute film, which in so many ways says so much. And that little film, it was made for nothing, with no forethought, and now it's traveling around the world. And Robert, the original elder who put up the teepee, his grandchildren have that as a record. And he through ceremony, he passed that teepee on to 2 young men in the community, and they're gonna continue that tradition. So that film really, said a lot on a personal level for me.
Oh, thank you, brother. As a relative that sits up in TP2, I know how excited I was when I first went on Alcatraz and I saw the teepee there. It's a little bit of a small teepee, but hey, I was excited to go sit up there and it was like, hey, maybe I can go sing some songs in there. So yeah, that was beautiful. Thank you for sharing that with us and thank you for putting that film together. It was really moving. Last but not least, I want to move on to Grandma Mary. Why don't you tell us, what really spoke to you in one of these films as your experience as an urban native?
Well, it's hard to say just one, because there's so much. And, I was just thinking about Peter. I have the privilege of being able to go down this long memory lane of people, and I'm thinking about back to the 70s and the people that were around, Richard when he was young, John White Fox, you know, um, the Bear Childs, Jim, Gail, you know, um,
Man killers.
the Man Killers. Oh my gosh, yeah, Wilma lived right down the street from us,
Yep.
and so your mom used to keep me on the straight and narrow. She was working there on Julian Street, and the different people in the community, and I was a youth then, and remembering, I said earlier about some of our gathering places. I think it was called the Play-In over on Larkin and Gary, where everybody used to get together. Those were places that we got together. But I think Sinu, some of the things that Betty talked about, I was put in a Catholic school in San Francisco, and I remember the principal there hated us, and I couldn't understand. She used to kick me and pull my hair and degrade my family, and this was here in San Francisco, and I think about our youth in our schools now, how we're trying to have them change the textbooks, you know, to bring more relevant history into the school, to bring our kids to their identity, their languages, and everything that's said there. And, I thought about everything that Betty talked about, April talked about that, getting educated and trying to bring it back to the community, and, some of the people not wanting to make change because they've been comfortable in accepting what they have as being good enough, and it's not good enough. And I think that people need to understand that see these films and stuff, that there were many different nations. There are many different nations in very different ways that we all speak to our creator and exist and do ceremonies. And, people think that, well, you know, if they don't know the communities, and April alluded to it, that on the reservations, there's lack of water, there's lack of, even simple things like getting mail. You don't have mail. You go to a post office, to get your mail and communicate. So all the things that a lot of times people, and then even now today, this gold, greed, and genocide. We just went through 4 years of that as a nation, you know? And us, we've gone through this for centuries, you know? It's, people nationally are having their eyes, this pandemic, and the fear of disease coming in and killing off their people. Hello, what do you think was done to us, you know, all along? And continues to be done, where we don't have adequate health support. And also, the racial disparity in medicine and education and all those things. you know People get offended, we see people stand up and advocate for many other people, but when we stand up and talk about our respect for the land, our respect for our traditions, you know, wanting people to respect those things that we respect, you know, that have kept us alive, they get offended, you know. How dare the Indians stand up and want to reclaim the land? Where do they think we should go back to? Well, you know what? That's your problem. You probably shouldn't came here to begin with, you know. But you know, there's just so much in all of these films that speak to my heart, and I think as you know, each of you are on your path in life, you know, you will understand better when you hear these things, because it does touch our heart and it just keeps us motivated. You know, I'm 64 years old. I'm not about to stop, you know. Give me 2 hours on this thing. I'll keep talking, you know.
Love it.
And that's only going to be a little bit about what I have to say, you know. And but I'm going to say Betty and her share, and Theta just is so much a part of all of us, you know, and our struggles and our strengths and our determination, and you know, the struggles with alcohol and drugs and those things that touch our community that we still are trying to heal, but that pain is so real. And yeah, that's what I had to say. So all of it, Sheree, and in particular, Sinew, that
That's all right.
fiber,
We'll put you on the next,
fiber, tendon. Yeah.
oh, thank you. We'll put you on the next 2-hour panel. I love what you said. You know, a fight for our community is not a fight against your community. A fight for our people when we stand up and we fight. And I know, watching Sinu and watching Betty, I think we all had this conversation before the panel started, was just a reminder of our responsibility here, and it's just a refresher that, man, those are feisty. We have some feisty elders. But I wanted to loop it back to my sister April. Wanted to make a few more comments on gold, greed, and genocide, and then we'll do the last question and we'll open it up to folks who have any questions.
Yeah, I don't want to forget gold, greed, and genocide. I really want to just, suggest that folks really see that film, because it really talks about the history of California Indians. And I know Greg touched a little bit on it, as well as myself. But, you know, a lot of times we are offended. People get upset when we're not 49er fans, or we get upset of that term. You know, that comes from the gold miners of 1849. You know, that's where that term came. And when you think about missing and murdered indigenous peoples, the federal government in California had a bounty out for our people. Our children were sold. Our young girls at like the ages of 8 and 10 were sold, and they were trafficked. You know, people don't want to talk about that. They were trafficked, and even our young boys, they were trafficked. And California had over 150,000 American Indian people here, and after the gold rush, we had about 30,000 people. I think that those numbers have gone up because we're resilient. We're still here, and we've married in. So we're Yuki, we're Wailaki, we're Pomo. Some of us are Lakota and Pomo, because I got some Sukis and some Sumos in my family, and it's just important to know that history of what happened during the gold rush to our people, because people don't want to hear that history. They don't want to realize that these are things that happened. And I just wanted to share that because right here in San Francisco, we have Hastings Law School, and Judge Hastings, he actually hung, he had, I guess you could say, he was a judge, and he ruled that there would be 500 Yuki to be hung. And those 500 Yuki are my language speakers. They're our traditional healers. They were our hunters. They were cultural bearers. And that's what happened. And because of those things, that's how we lost our language. So I just want to speak to that for Gold Grid and Genocide, because I think that film is so powerful. So thank you.
Thank you, April. I know one of the conversations we had was we were over by Embarcadero, and there's a thing here, and it's like, welcome to the gold rush, or the gold rush was here. And we're like, what's that? And we're in San Francisco. What are you, with gold rush in the ocean? Like,
it was by your house, I remember.
Hey, don't tell nobody where I live. But, walking out there, like, why is it so offensive when we're asking for you're on native land or to recognize Ramaytush Ohlone people, yet who the heck is going to sit there and pay for a banner? Well, I don't know if that's D3 or what district that is, that says you're welcome to the gold rush in San Francisco. Don't get me started. But I wanted to open it up to, as quick and as quick as we can in Indian country. You all are amazing leaders in the community, and it's an honor to have each and every one of you on my board, as or on our board as for the cultural district, and to shape this future. So I just want to know how you envision your role, or how you envision the cultural district really honoring the culture and the contributions of American Indians in San Francisco. And I will go ahead and pick on Greg.
Well, we just talked about it a minute ago. The first European contact here in California was on the land where they intended to come and stay. Was probably Portola and the expedition 1769. So it's a little over 250 years ago. And at least in contemporary time, that's a lot to unpack, because so much happened in that time. And the intent of all of that, whether it was the original Spanish missionaries and soldiers that came, whether it was the Mexican period, whether it was the American period, where it's the contemporary period, the force of it is to erase the past and erase us as part of that past. That's the force of it. And we see that all the way up into contemporary times. Just a few years ago, the state finally went through a process to upgrade the curriculum for fourth grade history, California history. And what I remember, one of the comments in that process that I was involved in as an activist, there were several comments that were made in the public part of it that said the challenge that we have, even those that know the history, even a little bit, they kind of said, I know it's wrong, but damn it, I made a mission in fourth grade, so my kids are going to do it too. That's what they remember. They don't remember the knowledge that they were supposed to gain. And I asked lots of people during that process, so you made a mission in fourth grade. What'd you remember of it? It was made of sugar cubes. It was made of popsicle sticks. Okay, that's not how the real ones are made. You know that, right? That was sort of the level of teaching that we were given to people, and not about the people themselves that made those missions out of their blood, sweat, and tears. And that's still the fight. I mean, we're just talking a few years ago, and the state finally says don't teach missions in that way, but they haven't replaced that yet. And that's the part of the work that I'm doing with a California Indian History Curriculum Coalition that's based out of CSU Sacramento, that is trying to address that work. But of course, as many of the things we do in our communities, it's very few people, very few resources, very little money, and we're still doing it anyway in the best way we can. And part of that is to support communities in writing their own history, rather than waiting for the government to come and do it, because we know how well that's gone so far. So we're just going to do it ourselves. And we now have the expertise within our communities, as several people have mentioned. We go off and get degrees, and we have people with PhDs in education who now can speak expertly on things like curriculum and standards and protocols in schools, and can write these in a comprehensive way. We don't have all the support we need from the state. It's moving, pretty much like a glacier, as most government does. But it's still happening, and that's one of the efforts that's happening to address the vast amount of ignorance about our own history here in California.
Thank you, Brother Greg. Before you hop off, one of the parts of the question was, how do you envision the American Indian Cultural District honoring the contributions of American Indians? Are we doing anything to help you out over here? Or are we just
the district and my relatives there, and especially you, Sheree, that have bailed me out many times, because my vast corporate staff has not been helpful, because I don't have one. But we certainly had a lot of contacts, especially the last couple of years, as we try to address the truth of what happened here. And it's complicated. We're trying to erase not only the history of America in California for 250 years, but we're also dealing with our own trauma while we're in the midst of doing it. And that trauma, to be honest, is turned inward as well. We lost the protocols that allowed us to deal appropriately with each other as well as outsiders. And we're getting those back, but it's a long, slow process. And so we're building relationships in the cultural district with all the relatives that have come here from other places, even the ones that have been, there all their lives, like Sister Mary there. But still, their blood and people are from another place. So we want to welcome them and take care of them within the homeland that most of us no longer live in, because we were pushed out. The first victims of gentrification in San Francisco hundreds of years ago. But we're still here. We haven't forgotten what our duties are and responsibilities. And we want to make sure that we fulfill those. And part of that is educating the public to things like using the term, and it's a crude term. It might be a little difficult to explain here, but we use the term Yelamu to describe sort of a district, an area. Those are contemporary terms of the collection of tribal people and villages that existed in San Francisco proper for thousands of years. And so that's just the beginning start. And that is relatively new information for lots of people, and we understand that. So part of our purpose is to get that information out there. We do that through the Cultural District, and hopefully on the Cultural District website, there's a link to the Ramaytush Ohlone website as well, and they can get more information there.
Thank you, Brother Greg. There definitely is, and we're working on. We have everything documented from all the work that's been done on the land acknowledgement legislation, and it's been an honor to partner and an honor to have a cultural district on Ramaytush Ohlone land. And I don't know. I'm announcing it here, just putting the thought out in the universe. I can't wait till we rename that Dolores Park. But anyways, I'm going to move on to my sister April, with their role as a board member leading the American Indian Cultural District efforts. How do you envision the American Indian Cultural District honoring the culture and contributions of American Indians?
Well, as the executive director of the American Indian Cultural Center, I knew that bringing Sheree on as the executive director for a cultural district was going to be, she was gonna stir things up, and with her young spirit to start some fights. But these are good fights. No, actually, I think that has always been our goal with the American Indian Cultural Center, was to have this district, thinking about our Ohlone relatives and how we are in their territory, and they've been so grateful to allow us to live here. And and I really have always said that I feel like it's their ancestors that keep me here, that their ancestors are the ones that are pulling me to continue to do this work. And I think that's what it is. And that's because that's how we were as Indian people. One of the things my grandma always reminded me in boarding school was that we were just Indian people. We weren't just like this tribe and that tribe. We were just Indian people. She used to say in boarding school, we had to work together. And that's really how I see, the cultural center and the cultural district really being this place of, of one, acknowledging our Ohlone people. It's sad that it's taken our city and county this long to have a land acknowledgement. And it's been all of those generation of folks like Mary and so forth who've done this work previous to me, previous to Sheree. But we finally have gotten here. And, and what we see is just really creating a space and a community for our children. My son is 14 years old. I want to make sure that, he's born and raised here and that he will have his community. He'll have a cultural center, he'll have a place to belong to. He's been going to Friendship House and Native American Health Center program since he was 5 years old. He's been going to Indian Ed, and now we have a district and cultural center. And so that has been always something that we wanted for our children to be able to have what we had as a child or had when we were younger. And I think that that's really what I see happening out of this cultural district is really creating a place for our future generations.
Sister April, can you talk a little bit, because I know you're helping lead the Indigenize project. Can you talk a little bit about your role in that and what that kind of does to shape visibility for Native folks?
Yeah, definitely. I think our vision is really to create in our district landmarks, not only of what our Ohlone relatives have shared with us as their sacred sites or relevant places that are important to them and their people, but also to this intertribal community of history of places and things that are important to our community. And what we want is for when people come to the American Indian Cultural District, that they'll be able to walk around our cultural district and learn about our people, learn about our community. And that's our goal, so that when they come here, they know that, wow, there are Native people here that have been here, and they'll learn the history of our people. And they'll go to, say, Dolores Park, and they'll be able to say how we see it, scan a barcode on their phone, and bam, a part of history will pop up and share with them where they're at. And I think that that's where we'll start to build respect and visibility. But like I said, I think it's really just educating people that California Indian people are still here. Ohlone people are still here. They have not left. This is their homeland, and they're still here, and they share this area with us. And so I think that's one of the most important things I want to see out of this.
Thank you, Sister April. I know you usually tell this story when we talk about the Indigenize project, about the Old American Indian Cultural Center. I think you mentioned it once. You said it was the spark that started the fire, before Alcatraz. And I thought that was so awesome, just talking about how we're going around and documenting those, traditional cultural sites through a Native lens and educating people through our lens and not that Western lens that our children have to read about, through that mission system or whatever, Brother Greg was talking about in our K-12. So we talked a little bit about the Ramaytush Ohlone land acknowledgement resolution and a little bit about the Indigenize project. Mary, I'd love to hear a little bit more about how you see the cultural district really honoring, American Indian legacy in San Francisco.
I was thinking about, when you get older, you do a lot of thinking. I reach agreements with myself here. But, my role, is to help provide guidance, to try and recall and remind our people about tradition, how we speak with each other, how we share with each other, and that, our communication, our talking is how we've always been, we've been portrayed as, sitting down and, having treaties and everything. We come with good spirits, and, we've always come from the perspective, we don't own this land. We're caretakers here, And so when these people came across to claim ownership of things, first, they were different people than us, but, to help them survive and to help them get through things. And, on this land, the Ramaytush people, the Ohlone people, they did likewise, And when the missionaries came in, Junipero Serra, I was just thinking when Brother Greg was talking about, recently a lot of these statues being taken down. And that one in the park that the Archbishop went out there and did an exorcism, right? For the people that took down the statue out there. To me, that was revisiting. How dare you think that about us? And not saying it was us that took down that statue, but I'm certainly not in disagreement with that. I think my role is to promote some of the talking, the understanding, the healing, to bring in some of that history of, where we have been in the fights. And I use that example about, this priest going out there and doing that exorcism. It's like, same thing that was done centuries ago, and they continue to do. And I think that the work of the cultural district and the cultural center is to promote a lot of understanding and visibility, and to make that statement, of that we're still here. But it's also, we do advocacy with government, right? We go to their meetings and their perspective of how they apportion support, based on their number and their inaccurate data and what their perceptions are, is being a facilitator of elevating those voices, elevating our voices, but not in a tolerant way. It's writing all those perceptions that have been imposed on us, all those things that continue to be perpetuated. When there's an advocacy about disparity, to bring about the discussion about racial disparity, why are we always left out of that conversation and recognition? That's our purpose. That's what the cultural district does. The designation of the landmark and being here and everything, that's part of it. But it's being the voices at those tables. It's reminding those people that are having these discussions and making those decisions. Wait a minute, we're here. And our voice is as important as anybody else in this room, and maybe even more important as the original peoples. And so I think it's bringing that forward. It's being those voices. It's also inspiring our youth to have that pride again in who they are and recognition of their identity, and continuing to plant those seeds and see it grow and flourish. So, yeah.
Oh, that was big.
No.
Oh, that was
Big O for Mary.
Yes, you all bring the fire. I know our brother Peter had to hop off, but I just want to say I appreciate each and every one of you and everything that you contribute. And I think for folks that are watching that don't understand, are saying cultural district, cultural center, the cultural district, what I tell folks is really just a place on a map. Without the cultural center, without, Native American Health Center, Friendship House Association for American Indians, without the Association of Ramaytush Ohlone, without the Cultural Conservancy, without, Restoring Justice for Indigenous Peoples, the leaders that are on our board. We have about 8 different American Indian organizations, leaders from 8 different American organizations. We have 12 board members that really just come together to get all of this work done. And I think in such a short amount of time, with different things, my sister April leading the Indigenize Project, and Mary just kind of helping be the fire behind, all of them are fire behind, everything that's going on. And Greg, doing stuff with the re-education on Ramaytush land and teaching us how to do it the right way. I feel like there's just a lot that's constantly moving with the cultural district and being shaped by all of these leaders and all of these people on the board. So when you see the cultural district, just understand the cultural district is, is for everybody, and it's shaped by everybody, and the work didn't start with us, and it will not end with us. So just want to let you all know it's been generations in the making, and it's not here because of any one of these particular people on the call. It's here because our elders that fought before us, and it's here because of the people that are on our board, and we're going to make sure it's here for our youth. So thank you all. I'm not sure what's going on next. Are we opening up for questions, or somebody guide me here? No. All right. Well, I guess we say good night. All right, Faye, I'm calling you on stage.
Thank you, everybody.
Yes.
Hi. Hello. Thank you so much, Sheree, Greg, April, Mary, and Peter. We're so excited to support the AICD. And for our audience, if you'd like to learn more, go to the links we've dropped in the chat. And also, full panelist bios are available on our website. Thank you so much. Have a good evening. Let me tell you about our 3 events tomorrow, Friday, February 19th. So at noon Pacific Standard Time, join us for Rebuilding Paradise panel discussion, including the town manager of Paradise himself, Kevin Phillips. And I will actually be moderating that panel. So come join us at 12 noon. And then at 4:30 p.m. PST, we have a special event, Let's Make Civic Love. You'll get a chance to ask a stranger 36 questions in Zoom breakout rooms. And if you remember back in Valentine's Day, February 14th, you saw Jessica and Chesa Boudin model the 36 questions. So tomorrow you can have your opportunity to do the same with a stranger at 4:30 Pacific time. There's still time to register for the Let's Make Civic Love Zoom breakout room, so please do that. And then come back at 6:30 Pacific Standard Time for People-Led Solutions, Models for a Shared Future with Jessica Prado. Again, she is incredible, multi-talented. She curated the program People-Led Solutions. This program is a panel discussion, and then we will practice civic love by assembling care packages and writing love notes to our unhoused neighbors in the East Bay as well as Chicago. And now I will turn it over to Crystal for 2 more last shout outs.
Thanks, Faye. Please take a moment to fill out our survey. The link is on screen. It really helps us understand who we're reaching and how we can make sure to be serving you, our incredible and diverse community. If you enjoyed tonight's program, please share our festival and tag us on social media at SF Urban Film Fest. Thank you again for joining us. Thank you so much to everyone at the American Indian Cultural District. It's been an honor to work with you. Have a great night, everyone. See you tomorrow.